Let me see your ID right now. What are you doing out here?
I'm just playing catch with my son. Why?
We got a call about a suspicious black man with a child. Do not argue with me.
Daddy, am I in trouble?
No, son, you're okay. We didn't do anything wrong.
It was a sunny Saturday afternoon, the kind of day that makes you forget all worries. A man named Taryn Williams had taken his 6-year-old son, Kai, to the neighborhood park to play catch. The field was wide, the grass freshly cut, and the laughter of children drifted through the air. Taryn had been looking forward to this all week. Work was stressful, and parenting on his own was exhausting, but for these few hours, it was just him and his son. The baseball flew in lazy arcs, Kai's small hands gripping his glove, eyes bright with concentration. Taryn called out gentle encouragements, smiling as Kai finally caught one of his throws. That moment, just a father, just a son, playing a simple game, was supposed to be safe, simple, joyful. Then, from the edge of the field, Taryn noticed a uniformed officer walking toward them. The police car had been parked quietly nearby, but now the officer's boots crunched the grass loudly, breaking the calm. Taryn felt a familiar tension tighten in his chest. As a black man, he had learned to read these moments instantly. Something that should have been ordinary was about to turn complicated, stressful, and wrong. "All right, let me see some ID right now," the officer said, his tone sharp, commanding, leaving no room for explanation. Taryn froze for a heartbeat. He looked around at the park, the families on the walking path, the kids on the playground, all enjoying the day. Nothing here was suspicious. Nothing here was wrong. Yet the officer's eyes held certainty, as if Taryn's mere presence in the park was a threat. "Before we continue, I want to ask, where are you watching this from right now? While you think about that, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next part of this story." Taryn turned slowly to face the officer. "ID? What for?" "I'm just here with my son," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. He placed a hand on Kai's shoulder, a protective gesture that made his son squeeze back instinctively. Kai didn't understand why a man in a uniform was talking to his dad like this. All he knew was the serious look on Taryn's face. The officer stepped closer, his posture rigid. "Sir, I asked for identification." "Go ahead and get it out," he said. Taryn's mind raced. He hadn't done anything wrong. He was in a public park, playing a normal game with his son. Yet here he was, facing the kind of scrutiny black people know too well. "We're just playing catch. My kid right here," he said, gesturing to Kai, whose eyes were wide with worry. The officer ignored the explanation. "I'll explain once I see the ID," he said. Taryn's stomach tightened. He knew what was coming next, but he also had to think about Kai. He knelt slightly, looking his son in the eye. "Stay calm, buddy. Just let me handle this," he whispered. Kai nodded, gripping his plastic bat tighter, still not fully understanding why the day had changed. The body language between the two men told the story even before any more words were spoken. Taryn's shoulders were squared, his hands slightly raised to show he meant no harm. The officer's stance was aggressive, chest out, eyes hard. The air between them felt heavy, like something invisible had grown suddenly thick, suffocating, impossible to ignore. As Taryn reached for his wallet, he spoke aloud, narrating each action to avoid misinterpretation. "I'm reaching for my wallet now. It's in my back pocket." Slowly, he pulled out his driver's license and handed it to the officer. The officer took the card, examined it closely. His eyes flicked between the name and the address. Taryn lived just a few blocks away. He wasn't a stranger. He wasn't a criminal. The license was proof of what Taryn had been saying all along. He was a local dad, spending a quiet afternoon with his son. The silence that followed was heavy, almost unbearable. The officer didn't apologize, didn't offer a word of explanation for the abrupt interrogation. He simply handed back the ID. "All right. You're good. Have a nice day," he said before turning and walking back toward his patrol car. Kai's small hand squeezed Taryn's as they watched the officer leave. The 6-year-old didn't fully understand why his dad had been treated that way, but he felt the fear, the tension, the unfairness. Taryn hugged Kai tightly, whispering reassurances that were as much for himself as for his son. "It's okay, buddy. We're safe. Everything's okay." But Taryn knew it wasn't entirely okay. It wasn't okay that a father and son enjoying a simple game in a park had to endure suspicion, interrogation, and fear because of the color of his skin. He knew that without recording the encounter, without witnesses, the story might have ended differently. He also knew he couldn't let this slide. Later that evening, after Kai was asleep, Taryn sat at his computer. He filed a detailed complaint with the police department. He requested the body cam footage and any related 911 calls. He wrote down every detail, describing the event clearly and calmly. He knew the fight wasn't over. He had to make sure what happened didn't go unnoticed. And it wouldn't be easy. He had to push against a system that often ignored complaints, that sometimes excused misconduct, that frequently let prejudice go unchecked. But Taryn Williams was not the kind of man to back down when his family's safety and dignity were at stake. In the coming days, the 911 call that had sent the officer to the park would be revealed. It would show a neighbor watching from her window, seeing nothing wrong, but calling the police anyway, her fear and assumptions turning into an official complaint. That call, coupled with the body cam footage, would tell a story far different from the one the officer assumed. Taryn's next challenge would be making sure the truth reached the right people. The evidence was clear, the story undeniable, but bureaucracies can move slowly, and justice is rarely immediate. Every day would be a battle to ensure accountability for himself, for Kai, and for anyone else who might face the same injustice. The sunny afternoon that started with laughter had turned into a test of resilience, courage, and the harsh reality of prejudice. Taryn knew that the fight had only just begun. The next morning, Taryn Williams woke up with the sound of birds outside his window, but his mind wasn't on the weather. It was on the previous day, on the officer's voice, and most of all, on Kai's confused eyes. Taryn knew he had to act, not out of anger alone, but to make sure what happened didn't happen to anyone else. He logged onto the Charlotte Police Department's public records portal and submitted a request for the 911 call that had led to the officer arriving at the park. North Carolina law guarantees access to these recordings, and Taryn knew that hearing the call was the only way to understand why someone had decided to turn an ordinary day into a nightmare. By midday, he received the recording. Taryn pressed play, holding his breath. A woman's voice came through the speakers, tense and uncertain. "I see a man in the park, with a child. He looks suspicious." The dispatcher asked, "What's he doing that seems suspicious?" I'm not sure. He's just standing there. Playing with the kid, I guess. But something feels off." "I don't know," the woman replied, her voice rising slightly. Taryn felt a mix of anger and disbelief. She hadn't seen a crime. She hadn't seen a threat. She had only seen a black man and assumed the worst. And now, because she had picked up the phone, an armed officer had come marching across the park, ready to interrogate a father in front of his son. He paused the recording and took a deep breath. "This is exactly what I feared," he muttered to himself. "This isn't vigilance. This is prejudice." Taryn immediately called the Internal Affairs Division and filed a formal complaint, attaching the body cam footage and the 911 call recording. Every word, every second of evidence mattered. He wrote clearly, leaving no room for doubt. "I was in a public park with my 6-year-old son, playing catch." The officer had no probable cause. The caller had no legitimate reason. This was harassment and racial profiling. It wasn't just about being right. It was about holding people accountable. If he didn't, someone else might suffer the same way. Within 24 hours, Taryn received a response. Internal Affairs had opened a formal investigation. A surgeon, a seasoned investigator who had dealt with dozens of complaints, would review the footage, examine the 911 call, and interview both the officer and the caller. Taryn felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this time, someone would see the truth. 2 days later, he got a call from the surgeon. "We're taking this seriously," the surgeon said. "The footage and the call speak for themselves. We'll investigate fully, and you'll be kept informed every step of the way." Taryn thanked him, but inside, he knew the work wasn't over. Systems move slowly, and people with bias rarely admit it easily. He had already prepared himself for weeks, maybe months, of proving something that should have been obvious. He was a father doing nothing wrong. Meanwhile, Officer Derek Cole, the man who had confronted Taryn, was unaware of the storm brewing in internal affairs. He reviewed the body cam footage multiple times, muttering to himself. "I followed procedure," he told no one in particular. "I was responding to a call." But every time he watched, the innocence of Taryn and Kai hit him harder. A man kneeling to show his son it was safe, a child laughing and reaching for the baseball. Nothing in that scene justified the suspicion he had carried in his heart. And yet, he had acted on that suspicion. Internal Affairs eventually summoned Cole for an interview. Taryn watched, waiting as the investigation slowly unfolded. He could feel the weight of every second, knowing that justice was not guaranteed. During the interview, the tension in the room was immediate. Cole sat rigidly, face tight, while the investigator leaned forward, calm but firm. "Explain why you approached Mr. Williams the way you did," the investigator said. Cole shifted in his chair. "I was responding to a call about a suspicious man with a child in a public park. I was doing my job." "Did you have any specific evidence that Mr. Williams was committing a crime?" the investigator pressed. Cole hesitated. His eyes flicked down at the table. "No, not really. I thought he didn't belong there." "Because of his race?" the investigator asked directly. Cole stiffened, words failing him. The truth had been obvious, but admitting it carried consequences. He muttered something about caution, about the 911 call, but the investigator held firm. "Your actions are not judged by intention alone. The outcome matters. Mr. Williams was doing nothing wrong, and your approach caused fear to a child and harassment to a parent." Back at home, Taryn went over the 911 recording again with Kai sitting nearby. The boy was curious, but Taryn chose his words carefully. "See, buddy, this is why it's important to be honest and fair. Some people make mistakes about others. That's why Daddy had to show everyone what really happened." Kai's brow furrowed. "But why would she call the police if you were just playing with me?" Taryn paused, struggling to make a 6-year-old understand. Sometimes people let fear and what they think is right get in the way. They make wrong decisions, even when there's no problem. That's why we have rules and checks, so the truth can come out. Days later, the investigation revealed even more. Cole's personnel record was examined. There were multiple previous complaints about him stopping people without cause, especially black and brown citizens. None of those complaints had led to severe consequences, but this case was different. The combination of body cam footage, the 911 recording, and the undeniable innocence of Taryn and Kai left the department little choice. Meanwhile, Taryn's story began circulating online. Local news outlets picked it up, sharing the body cam footage alongside the recording of the call. The public reaction was immediate. People expressed outrage, sympathy, and support. Taryn and Kai were suddenly the center of a larger conversation about racial profiling and accountability. Taryn knew the attention could bring both good and bad. Some people would criticize, others would share similar experiences, but he felt it was necessary. If nothing else, it would show that a father's love and courage could confront prejudice in a meaningful way. He still worried about Kai, though. The boy had begun to notice police more, tensing when they passed by, asking questions about why men in uniform sometimes acted differently toward black families. Taryn tried to reassure him without sugarcoating reality. Most officers are good, buddy. This was just one person making a mistake. But it's important to know that sometimes people do wrong, and when they do, you have to stand up for what's right. That Saturday, as Taryn and Kai returned to the park, they noticed the officer who had come before was no longer in sight. But Taryn remained alert. Every footstep across the grass, every approaching figure, caused a flash of memory. He threw the ball to Kai, laughing when he caught it, but inside, the tension hadn't fully lifted. The fight for accountability had begun, and Taryn knew it wouldn't end until justice was done. The investigation continued, with Taryn providing statements, reviewing footage, and keeping detailed notes of every interaction. Each day brought new stress, but also a growing certainty that the truth was on his side. The system might be slow, but the evidence was clear. And this time, it could not be ignored. The investigation moved faster than Taryn Williams had expected, but the tension only grew. Every day, he checked his email, hoping for updates from internal affairs, wondering what Officer Derek Cole would say next, and fearing the small chance that bureaucracy might still protect him. Taryn couldn't ignore Kai's questions either. "Daddy, is that officer going to come back?" Kai asked one evening as they sat on the couch, toys scattered around them. Taryn shook his head. "No, buddy. He won't bother us again. But it's okay to be careful, to notice things, and to ask questions if you feel scared." Taryn had made it clear to Kai that most police officers were good people, but that one person's actions had been wrong and unfair. He wanted his son to feel safe while also understanding reality. It was a delicate balance, teaching courage without fear. Meanwhile, the police department's internal investigation was turning up more than Taryn had hoped. Cole's past record was examined closely. Multiple complaints of unwarranted stops and harassment of black and brown citizens were found. Internal Affairs discovered that Cole had repeatedly used vague reasoning to justify his actions. "He looked suspicious. He didn't seem right. I felt uneasy." The evidence was clear. Patterns of bias had influenced his decisions for years. Taryn followed the updates closely. The Bodycam footage, combined with the 911 call, left no room for defense. He could see that the department was building a case strong enough to recommend serious consequences. One afternoon, Taryn received a call from the Internal Affairs surgeon. "Mr. Williams, we have reviewed all evidence. Officer Cole violated department policy and acted without reasonable suspicion. We will be recommending termination." Taryn felt a mixture of relief and validation. The fight was far from over, but justice was finally catching up. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That's all I wanted, to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." Later that week, Cole was called in for a final hearing. Taryn didn't attend, but he imagined the tension in the room. Cole had no real defense. The footage and recordings were undeniable. Every argument about procedure crumbled when faced with the simple truth. He had stopped a father and his young son who were doing nothing wrong. After the hearing, the police chief confirmed the termination. Cole's badge was revoked. His career with the department ended. The official statement cited repeated misconduct, bias in stops, and failure to adhere to departmental standards. It was a rare and decisive action, a warning to others. Taryn couldn't help but feel satisfaction, but also a deep sadness. The victory didn't erase the fear Kai had felt, the tension Taryn had endured, or the trauma of being treated like a criminal for no reason. The world had seen the truth, but the moment of innocence had been lost forever. In the days that followed, the 911 caller, a woman named Linda Harris, was contacted by police about her actions. The recording of her call made it clear that there had been no actual threat. She had called because Taryn looked different from what she expected in her neighborhood park. The law in North Carolina allows charges for misuse of 911 when no legitimate emergency exists, and Harris faced consequences. Taryn watched the public records unfold. Harris was fined, and required to complete community service, specifically working with organizations focused on racial justice and community education. The outcome wasn't just legal, it was social. Her reputation in the neighborhood suffered as people realized her call had unnecessarily endangered a father and his child. Taryn and Kai slowly returned to a sense of normalcy, but the park visits were different. Kai stayed closer to his father. Taryn noticed that even as he laughed and threw the ball, a shadow lingered in his son's eyes. The lesson had been learned far too early. Not everyone sees black families as safe, innocent, or worthy of trust. One Saturday afternoon, while throwing the ball to Kai, a stranger walked past and commented, "I heard about what happened. I'm glad he got fired." Taryn nodded but didn't respond much. He had learned that public support was important, but it didn't erase the personal cost. That evening, Kai asked the question Taryn had been dreading. "Daddy, why did that police officer think you were bad?" Taryn sat on the edge of the bed, choosing his words carefully. Some people make mistakes. They judge others by how they look instead of who they are. It's not fair. It's not right. But when it happens, good people have to stand up and show the truth. That's what I did. "But why me?" Kai asked softly, eyes wide. "You were with me, buddy. That's all that matters. We were safe, and we did the right thing. Sometimes people's mistakes affect us, but it doesn't change who we are. Daddy will always protect you." Even after the officer was fired and the caller penalized, Taryn knew some lessons couldn't be erased. Kai would remember the fear, the confusion, the moment a simple game turned into a confrontation. The system had corrected the wrong, but it could not give back the lost innocence. Taryn also realized the impact on the broader community. Stories like theirs were far too common. Black parents teach their children to be cautious around authority figures, to explain their movements, to anticipate suspicion even in public spaces. Taryn's fight was personal, but it was also a symbol of resistance, accountability, and the importance of evidence and persistence. He decided to share his story publicly, using local news and social media. The Bodycam footage and the recording of the 911 call illustrated what many already knew but few had seen clearly. People commented, shared, and discussed, expanding the conversation far beyond Charlotte. The reaction was overwhelming. Taryn received messages from parents, activists, and even other officers who supported accountability. People expressed outrage, sympathy, and encouragement. Taryn realized that while the battle for justice was personal, it could also educate, inspire, and prevent future incidents. At home, Taryn continued teaching Kai about fairness, courage, and the importance of speaking the truth. They still went to the park, still played catch, but the lessons lingered. The world could be unjust, but responding with integrity, persistence, and love could change outcomes. And while the fear would never completely disappear, Taryn had turned a traumatic event into a story of action, accountability, and proof that standing up for what's right could have real consequences. Weeks had passed since Officer Derek Cole was fired and the 911 caller, Linda Harris, faced her consequences. Taryn Williams and his son Kai were slowly trying to return to their routine. But the memory of that afternoon in the park still hung in the air. Every Saturday, when Taryn threw the baseball to Kai, he saw glimpses of hesitation in his son's eyes. It was subtle, but it was there. A reminder that even when justice is served, the effects of fear and prejudice don't vanish instantly. The local news had covered the story extensively. Clips of the Bodycam footage, side by side with the 911 call, were broadcast to households across Charlotte and beyond. Social media posts shared the video widely. People expressed outrage at the officer's actions and empathy for Taryn and Kai. Many parents reached out, sharing similar experiences, thanking Taryn for speaking up, for showing what it looked like to fight for accountability. At the same time, Taryn had to manage the personal impact of the attention. His inbox overflowed with messages, some supportive, some critical. There were questions about his son's safety, debates over policing, and even some misguided blame directed at him. It was exhausting, but Taryn understood it was part of what comes with standing up for the truth. One afternoon, as Taryn and Kai returned to Oak Meadow Park, they noticed more families watching them play. A woman called out, "I saw the news about you. Glad everything worked out." Taryn smiled politely, but inside he remained vigilant. He knew that not every stranger would be kind, that not every officer would act fairly, and that they had to navigate the world carefully. Later that day, Taryn reflected on the entire experience. He thought about the officer who had assumed guilt without evidence, the neighbor who had let fear guide her actions, and the system that could either protect or fail people in these moments. He thought about the moment he had reached into his pocket, handed over his ID, and wondered if he had done everything right. And he knew he had. He had stayed calm, documented everything, and refused to let fear silence him. Kai approached him, baseball in hand. "Daddy, can we play a little further out today?" he asked. There was curiosity in his voice, a mix of hope and caution. Taryn nodded. "Sure, buddy, but let's stick together." He realized that even simple adjustments mattered now. Every choice in that park, every position on the field, was influenced by what had happened. Even the smallest gestures carried lessons in awareness and safety. Taryn also began speaking publicly about the experience, joining panels, giving interviews, and sharing the story online. His message was clear and simple. Racial bias can affect anyone, even in moments that seem completely normal. But accountability is possible when people document incidents, speak up, and insist on justice. He spoke about the role of body cameras in holding officers accountable. He spoke about the importance of public records and transparency. He emphasized the human cost, the fear, the trauma, and the lessons children like Kai learn far too early about the realities of being Black in public spaces. One interview focused entirely on his son. Taryn explained how Kai had witnessed the entire interaction and how it had affected him. Children learn from what they see. Kai saw fear, confusion, and injustice firsthand. "My job as a parent is to help him process that, to help him understand that not everyone acts fairly, but that we can respond with truth, courage, and calm." At home, bedtime conversations became moments of learning. "Daddy, will a policeman ever think I'm bad if I'm just playing?" Kai asked one night. Taryn held his son close. "Most officers are good, buddy. This was one mistake by one person. But you have to remember that sometimes people make wrong decisions. And when they do, it's important to stay calm, stay honest, and tell the truth." Kai nodded. "Okay, Daddy, I'll try." Taryn knew the lessons were deep and long-lasting. It wasn't just about catching a ball or standing in a park. It was about understanding the world, the biases that exist, and the strength it takes to face them. And while justice had been served, he understood that the fear Kai had felt might linger for years. He also thought about the larger impact. Officer Cole's firing sent a message. It showed that misconduct could have consequences. The 911 callers penalty showed that false or prejudiced reports could be punished. Taryn realized that accountability was rare, but possible, and that even small actions, documenting events, speaking up, and refusing to be silent, could ripple outward, affecting not just one family, but a community. The father and son continued their Saturday ritual at Oak Meadow Park. The ball flew across the field, laughter echoed, and for moments, they were just a father and a son again. Taryn watched Kai closely, noting when his gaze flicked nervously toward strangers or toward a passing patrol car. Each time, he offered reassurance. "We're safe, buddy. We know how to protect ourselves, and we did the right thing." Eventually, the story became more than just their personal experience. It became a teaching moment for neighbors, schools, and even other law enforcement officers. Taryn spoke at community forums about racial bias, about the importance of reporting misconduct, and about protecting children from the emotional consequences of these encounters. For Kai, the park would never feel entirely the same as it had before that day. But he learned resilience, the ability to trust his father's judgment, and the knowledge that injustice could be confronted. He learned that fairness matters and that adults have a responsibility to act when others make mistakes. Taryn looked at his son one last time that Saturday afternoon as the sun began to set. Remember, buddy, what we do now matters. Playing catch is fun, but standing up for what's right is important too. We showed people that even when fear and prejudice appear, courage and honesty win in the end. Kai smiled, catching the ball perfectly. I understand, Daddy. Taryn realized then that while the incident had been traumatic, it had also taught invaluable lessons about truth, accountability, and resilience. They couldn't erase the past, but they could shape the future, one catch, one conversation, one act of courage at a time. And that was the real victory. The story of Taryn and Kai, of the officer who lost his badge and the neighbor who faced consequences, spread far beyond Oak Meadow Park. It became a reminder. Standing up for what's right, even in the face of fear and prejudice, could make a difference. The wounds might linger, but justice, courage, and truth could prevail.